Okay, I want you to imagine a land before any cities, before farming, even before civilization as we know it. A land where the first human footsteps once echoed, but they didn't belong to the people of Harappa. No, they belonged to someone far, far older. This is that story. This is the epic of the very first humans of India, a tale of survival that stretches across millions of years.
So who exactly were these ancient pioneers? I mean, where did they come from? And here's the big one. Why did they just vanish? What happened that paved the way for our own ancestors, Homo sapiens, to take over the subcontinent? That's the great mystery we're going to unpack right now.
Now, to really get this, you have to wrap your head around the timeline we're talking about. It is absolutely immense. Our story kicks off 50 million years ago. Then it jumps to 1.5 million years ago when the first humans show up. And then all the way to just 65,000 years ago, a blink of an eye, really, when our direct ancestors finally arrive on the scene.
But before any people could get here, the stage itself had to be set. So our story doesn't start with humans at all. It starts with the violent, spectacular birth of the land itself.
Think about this. 50 million years ago, the land we now call India was actually a giant, lonely island. It was like this massive ship of rock that had broken off from Africa and was just sailing across a huge ocean called the Tethys Sea, heading north on a collision course it could not avoid.
And then, bam, the collision happened. It was so unbelievably violent, it literally swallowed the ocean between the two continents. All that pressure forced the Earth's crust to buckle and fold, pushing it higher and higher until it was scraping the sky. And just like that, the Himalayas were born. This giant wall changed everything. It blocked the winds, and for the very first time, life-giving monsoon rains began to fall on this thirsty land. A barren rock was transformed into a paradise, totally ready for its first residents. So, the stage was set. Paradise was ready. But the first masters of this new land, they weren't human, not even close. They were giants. And this wasn't some peaceful garden, let me tell you. This was a land ruled by absolute monsters. You had the stegodon, an ancestor of the elephant, with 10-foot-long tusks, making the ground shake with every step. Down on the rivers, you had the hexaprotodon, a hippo-like beast the size of a truck, with jaws so powerful they could crush stone. In this world, the only law was survival of the biggest, strongest jaw.
But then, into this land of giants, a totally new creature appeared. Around 1.5 million years ago, a group of fearless travelers literally walked into India all the way from Africa. They were Homo erectus, the very first human species to walk fully upright. And here in India, we know them from a fossilized skull found in the Narmada Valley, which is why we call them Narmada Man.
Now, these were not people like you and me. They were powerfully built, athletic, with a smaller forehead and this really prominent brow ridge. Their ultimate weapon, their all-purpose tool, was the hand axe, a simple pear-shaped stone they held in their fist. It was their knife, their hammer, everything. And with this one tool, they hunted colossal animals and completely ruled the Indian subcontinent for over 1 million years. They seemed absolutely invincible.
I mean, they beat floods, they beat droughts, they beat giant beasts. It really looked like their reign was going to last forever. But thousands of miles away, a natural time bomb was ticking, one that was about to unleash a storm of fire that would change the world forever.
So you have to ask yourself, right? If they were so powerful, so dominant for 1 million years, how did they just vanish from the face of the Earth? What on earth could have possibly defeated them?
The answer comes down to one word: Toba. Over on the island of Sumatra in Indonesia, a supervolcano erupted with a force so immense you could have heard the boom 3,000 kilometers away in India. But the real danger wasn't the sound. It was the white death that came after. This thick, choking blanket of volcanic ash that blotted out the sun and plunged all of India into a freezing, dark volcanic winter. And this is the crazy part. Their greatest strengths suddenly became their fatal weaknesses. First, their bodies. Being big and muscular is like driving a gas guzzler. You need a ton of fuel. When the big animals, their main food source, disappeared in the winter, they starved. Second, their tools. That heavy hand axe was great for big game, but it was totally useless against the small, fast animals that survived. And finally, their mindset. They lived completely in the moment. They had no ability to plan for the future, so they didn't store food. The very things that made them masters of the old world guaranteed they wouldn't survive in the new one.
But this devastating end was also, believe it or not, a new beginning.
Because as one human lineage faded away into ash and darkness, another was just getting ready for an epic journey that would lead them right to this very land.
See, back in Africa, our own ancestors, Homo sapiens, were facing a crisis of their own. The climate was drying up, and their home just couldn't support them anymore. They were left with a brutal choice: stay and die, or walk out into the complete unknown, chasing just a sliver of hope. They chose hope.
And what a journey it was. It was incredibly dangerous. They built these makeshift rafts just to cross the Red Sea, and you can bet many were lost to the waves. The ones who survived just walked. They hugged the coastline for thousands of years, generation after generation, pushing forward. And then, about 65,000 years ago, their descendants finally set foot on the shores of India. The land, once buried in ash, was alive again. It was green, fertile, and just teeming with life.
So, they had arrived in paradise. But surviving here and thriving, that was going to take more than just brute strength. It was going to require something totally new, a complete revolution in thinking and technology. And this, right here, is the key difference between them. Homo erectus had the hand axe, a tool of pure brute force. Our ancestors invented something called the microlith, a tiny, sharp blade of stone. This wasn't just a new tool. It was a total shift from muscle to mind, from brute force to precise, calculated intellect.
So how was a tiny little stone blade so revolutionary? Well, because they didn't use it by itself. They started combining it with other materials. They attached these little microliths to wooden shafts, and by doing that, they created the world's very first missile technology, spears and arrows. All of a sudden, they could hunt fast-moving deer from a safe distance. Brainpower had officially defeated brawn. Game over.
And with survival more or less secured, something truly incredible started to happen. In places like the Bembetka Caves, we can see the very first foundations of society being laid. Fire became their security guard at night, and also their social media, where they gathered to share stories. They started making art, painting their hopes and fears on the cave walls. They crafted ornaments from ostrich eggshells, the first real sense of personal identity. They built communities on one simple rule: share what you have today, because tomorrow you might have nothing. And they even started burying their dead with tools and food, which shows the first little flicker of a belief in an afterlife.
For tens of thousands of years, this was life. But then came another revolution, one that would change humanity forever. And it all kicked off around 9,000 years ago.
It was just a tiny seed, but it changed everything. Humans finally realized they didn't have to constantly chase their food. They could grow it. In that moment, the hunter became a farmer. The wanderer put down roots and built a permanent home. And soon, small villages began popping up along the riverbanks, laying the groundwork for civilization itself.
And over thousands of years, those little villages grew. And that incredible journey culminated in this, the Indus Valley Civilization. I mean, while most of the world was still living in basic huts, India gave birth to some of the world's first true cities. We're talking about the world's first smart cities, with grid-patterned streets, advanced drainage systems that would still impress modern engineers, and unbelievable structures like the Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro.
You see, this entire journey, from that lonely island to a land of giants, through a storm of fire, to the arrival of our clever ancestors armed with new ideas and community, all of it had to happen. It was the long, unbelievably difficult process of laying the foundations for one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known.